Today is today's tax talk. I'm your host. I'm attorney Stephen Leahy. A lot of people working from home. It's turned out to be a good thing for many people. I think it just kind of exasperated what was going to happen in the long run, but it happened. Everybody's working from home, and everybody's finding out you can work anywhere. What will that mean for your taxes? And what will that mean if you're an employer and your company and your employees are working in another state or another country even? That's going to be an issue. So that's what we're going to talk about today on today's Tax Talk. Again, here we are. Today's tax talk. We're gonna, there was a case that now you might be aware of this, maybe you're not, but I certainly am. Is when the Supreme Court is coming out with decisions. They have a term going on right now, and they're coming out with a bunch of decisions about different rulings. Something that people don't realize is how many of these cases that the Supreme Court has come down this year have been unanimous, more than usual, more than in the last 8 years, certainly. Everybody thought that the addition of these conservative justices, as they like to label them, would be a lot of at least 6-3 decisions or 5-4 decisions, and again, the majority of these cases have been unanimous. But a case that they didn't take, and that's that's sometimes more important than the cases that they do. I shouldn't say more important, but just as important as those cases that they do take. For one. So one of the cases they didn't take had to do with taxing the employees, right? So generally you pay, especially here in Chicago, so many people come from Wisconsin or right over the border in Indiana, and they work in Illinois. And so then the question becomes, well, where do they pay their taxes? Generally, if your company is in Illinois, then you have to pay Illinois taxes. But what happens when you don't go to Illinois, even though you work for an Illinois company? Okay, so that's really what's going on here, and so there's a number of articles about this. This was my favorite article. I don't know what happened to it, but. Forbes has an article, and here it is. Supreme Court won't hear New Hampshire's remote workers case, but this tax fight is far from over, right? Because it's not going to. Remote working is here to stay, right? So if it was all going back, what happened was in Massachusetts passed an emergency law that said, hey. Even though these people aren't coming into Massachusetts, we want to charge them. They're paying a 5% tax to Massachusetts. And even though they're not coming here, they still have to pay their taxes. And so they passed an emergency rule that said that they did. New Hampshire, Governor Sununu in New Hampshire brought a case. Last October, brought a case against Massachusetts. And this is the case that the courts have denied. So let's read a little bit about this. The U.S. Supreme Court said this week that it won't hear a case. I already told you that. But with the increase in work at home, thanks to the habits formed during the pandemic, the issue of which state gets tax incomes of their workers is unlikely to go away. So here, Massachusetts is relying on these people. And what if they never come back into the state? Well, then legally they can't tax them. So this case before the court was dealt with New Hampshire. But Massachusetts' convenience rule allowing out-of-state taxation is an established practice by 6 other states also, Arkansas, and they list these other states. And broad ruling by the Supreme Court could have impacted more than 2 million Americans, and probably more than that coming up, right? I mean, it's going to make a big difference. One of the big problems with New Hampshire's case is the question of harm, she said. The state doesn't tax income, so it's not directly losing potential income for tax revenue. So again, people live in New Hampshire. New Hampshire doesn't have a state income tax. And so they're working for a company that's in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts saying, "Hey, pay us the tax." And New Hampshire feels like they're being slighted, that their citizens are being slighted, and actually they are, right? Now they say, Massachusetts said, "Well, we're just keeping the status quo because if we didn't have this emergency and we didn't have a lockdown, those people would be traveling into Massachusetts and we would be getting their money." Well, again, I think that's a good argument if you're on their side. But the fact is, they weren't in Massachusetts. They didn't collect. They didn't work in Massachusetts. They worked in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire doesn't have a income tax. So should they pay income tax? So there's a lot going on now. Again, many people now are talking. Here's another article about the same thing in accountancy, because this has to do with taxes. Now, but think about this: if you're going to everybody's talking, well, I can move from everywhere. I know people, you probably know people who moved. I know people who moved to Colorado, moved to Montana is a big hot state now because a lot of people can work anywhere from anywhere. And so they're moving to places like Montana, Wyoming, lower taxes, beautiful country. They could buy a big home with a great view for the same money. They could buy a smaller home here without a great view. And so they're moving to these places. But nobody's thinking about what the ramifications of that is. How is that going to affect my taxes? It may be that you're going to have to pay taxes in two places. Some states have what they call reciprocal agreements, where if you pay taxes in one state, it will override the taxes in another state. I believe Indiana and Chicago have this. In Illinois, I should say, have this agreement, reciprocal agreement. You tax our people, we'll tax your people, and they hope that it works out the same. But some states don't, and so when they don't have the reciprocal agreement, you wind up paying two taxes, right? And it gets even more complicated, right? If you move to Paradise, well, where do remote employees pay taxes? Out of state remote workers. What happens if you go to Belize? What if you go to the Bahamas? If you move to Europe, a lot of countries are seeing this move, and they're encouraging it. They're offering visas for people to come out and move there and live there and work there for tax advantages. Okay, but here's another thing now. Not only does it affect the employee, but what about the employers? Right now, if I'm an employer and I'm in Massachusetts, say, now my employees are working in New Hampshire. Well, New Hampshire, again, they don't have the state income tax, but they have other taxes. They have workers' comp tax. They have many other taxes that the municipality is going to have to pay. And so if I'm an employer, now I have to worry about where my employees are working, because I'm going to have to pay taxes in all of those different locations, and not only income tax, but all these other taxes, and some have excise taxes, and some have they get very complicated in the taxes that they can impose on the employer, and so now if I'm in one location, I have to worry about one location and their tax policies. But if I have employees all over the country, sometimes all over the world, now I got to worry about all of these tax ramifications all over the country, all over the world. It gets really complicated. And it's something that I don't think most people think about. As we change our society to remote working, we're going to have to change some of the tax ramifications, because it can't remain the same, or can it? I know many of these states are not going to want to give up. These states are not going to want to give up this money, and because it's going to have a big effect. And it's usually these bigger states that are already having financial situations. So Chicago, if they're taxing employees in Chicago and now they're not coming into Chicago, how are they can they still tax them? According to this, they can't, because the court didn't take up that. Doesn't mean that they won't take up a case later. And I think that there's going to be more to say about this, and the Supreme Court's going to have to step in and do something and make a decision whether they can tax. Can you tax out-of-state residents? If I've never been to your state, can you tax me? Again, this is a problem. I've had many cases where helping people who moved out of Illinois, and Illinois says, no, you still, even though you moved there, we think it's temporary. You didn't change your domicile. So there's a difference between a domicile and residence. So many people are under the impression that if they just pick up and move for 181 days, they can come back and live their life and prove, hey, I was over there 181 days. You can't tax me any longer. That's just not true. Okay, so I've seen a lot of cases where people move and they never come back to Illinois, and Illinois still wants to collect their taxes from them, and so it gets complicated. There's many different badges that they look at. Where's your doctor? Where do your kids go to school? What address do you use on your driver's license? What address do you use on the tax forms? There's lots of different ways that they can look to see if you have actually changed your domicile rather than just your residence. If you have a lot of family here in Illinois, they can say, well, you're going to come back. Okay, so you still live here and you're still going to have to pay your taxes. We've all heard about California coming up with this exit tax. People want to leave California. They want to hit you with a tax. Because they figure that that's their money, right? They don't think that you should be taking their money with you when you move. So again, it gets complicated. I think it gets more complicated for the employers and payroll taxes on the other end. So this stuff can get very complicated. This is not IRS stuff. This is state taxes. So state tax stuff, again, it's just as important as it is with the federal taxes. And if you don't account for all this or take it into effect or understand what the ramifications might be, it's going to be a headache for human resources people. Again, different rules, different states have different rules, different insurance regulations, different everything. So again, I wanted to address this because remote working is now such a big part of our society. Is it a big part of your life? Well, again, you're going to have to figure out, well, how is that going to affect me when I'm and my employer? Because again, if the employer is taking a big hit, maybe they won't allow you to work out of time. And I've heard this from many employers are saying, no, you got to start coming into work again. You can't work remote. Because of the difficulty it is having remote workers all over and the taxes and the headaches that it causes. We'll have to work through this if we're going to be a remote working society. And if you truly can work from anywhere, then what are the taxes? What are the tax ramifications? Everybody's fleeing these high tax states. And if you're going to work somewhere, you might as well work in a low tax state or no tax state. There's lots more than just than income taxes in states. Use state taxes, property taxes. You got to take all that into consideration. But income tax is a big one. So, that's something to think about. And we're going to think about it until tomorrow when we think about something else here on today's Tax Talk. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow.